delighted to be joined today by Tim Gregory. Tim, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. You?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Good.
Let me ask the question kind of about the wonderful world of science, which is, do you despair at everyone because we're all so scared of it, or kind of is it something you feel like we're embracing more over time?
I think there's a slight sense of despair, especially when it comes to nuclear science.
Yes.
Because I think maybe, not uniquely, but it's a nice example of an area of science that has a huge amount to offer the world. Not just nuclear power, which is the obvious one, but space exploration, nuclear medicine, forensics, environmental sciences, and yet there's this kind of deep fear, this bad PR surrounding nuclear. And so outside of the lab, which is where I work for my day job, I spend an awful lot of time speaking to audiences, writing about nuclear science and the things it has to offer the world. And
why did it kind of, I know what springs to mind for myself about the fear, but is it kind of us, is the world of science, the world of kind of nuclear, are they just bad at PR, or is kind of it too entrenched in our human psyche?
I think that's definitely a part of it. The PR surrounding nuclear is terrible. I mean, if you just take nuclear power as an example, the wind turbine and solar panel advocates over the last 20 years have done a fantastic job of making renewable energy synonymous with net zero and synonymous with environmentally friendly, whereas the nuclear sector haven't been advocates for themselves perhaps in the way that they should have been. And so there's undoubtedly bad PR, but I think there's also something on the other side of the coin, which is there's quite a vocal and organised anti-nuclear lobby, kind of leveraging people's fear and spreading misunderstanding amongst the public about the risks of nuclear, the health effects of radiation, all that kind of thing as well.
And is this something you've been like in your career and kind of as you're training, kind of at university, or is this something you were conscious of? You wanted to be an advocate for the whole thing, or was it something that came about?
Well, when I was doing my A-levels, I was kind of interested in everything, I found. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but it's funny because when I was 16, so that's half a lifetime ago for me, I wrote an essay as part of one of my A-levels, and it was called "How Does Nuclear Power Work and Will It Save Us?" And so I kind of feel like my life in a funny way has kind of come full circle all the way back from when I was 16, and so it's certainly something that I've been interested in for a long time.
At what point did you realise kind of that actually, well, you're as good, who knows, you're kind of, but you could be the voice, you could be the voice of this area, which actually most people kind of automatically switch off from, or just assume you're going to be very dry and kind of droll about the whole thing.
I hope not.
No, but that's how it's like. You kind of this is the joy of it. Actually, you bring enthusiasm and infectiousness to a subject which actually most people are going to immediately switch off from.
Yeah, the thing that initially drew me to science is my interest in it. If I'm being perfectly honest, it just resonates with me. You know, when you're just interested in something and it's difficult to explain why you're interested in it, you just are.
Yes.
That's always been science for me. And that's why I chose to do a science subject for my A-levels. I did sciences, science at university, did my PhD. I've always been interested in science. That's been my primary motivation. And I guess it all started for me in my undergraduate when I volunteered at the Manchester Museum on a Saturday, talking to the public about science. I kind of discovered I have a bit of a knack for talking about science and talking to people and getting the good word out there about the cool things that we do. But as I've got a bit older, I've kept that interest, but I've also realised that perhaps the most powerful thing about science is that it turns ignorance into knowledge, and by using inventiveness we can turn knowledge into technology, and by using technology we can solve problems and make the world a better place, and that's what motivates me.
And do you think kind of, and I want to talk in a minute about net worth, but do you kind of net zero, but do you think science has done itself a disservice by the fact of thinking that kind of to simplify to appeal to everyone actually demean science?
I don't think so. I think it's very easy to underestimate the kind of the appetite for science out there in the public. I wasn't really aware of this kind of thing 20 years ago, but I get the impression that science wasn't the hot topic 20 years ago that it is today. But you see it all the time on television, books, podcasts, radio. Science is very much a part of the public consciousness now, and so it should be, because we live in a civilization that's fundamentally based on science and technology. So the more people have an interest in science, or even if it's not an overt interest but an appreciation and an awareness of science, that's all the more better for society.
So let me take net zero. Got net zero, especially and nuclear. I know, kind of, I love that face. That's perfect. Sum it up for me. Why nuclear is so critical to net zero, and then why do we not get that?
Okay, so energy is absolutely fundamental to the flourishing of humankind. It's the force that lifts entire nations and indeed entire continents out of poverty by industrialisation, and it powers the technologies that make the modern world turn. So we need an awful lot of energy. And as part of net zero, energy reductions and efficiencies will be part of that, but it's really just beating around the bush, it's skirting around the edges. What we need are new ways to harvest energy without the carbon dioxide emissions that you get from fossil fuels. And whilst renewables do have a part to play in that, they are not the answer. Net zero is impossible without nuclear. Nuclear is the only way that we can achieve net zero without sacrificing things like energy security and reliability, without sacrificing energy independence. And it's also, by virtually every metric you can measure it, the cleanest form of energy production that we know of, whether you look at the amount of minerals that you need to generate a terawatt hour of electricity, the amount of land that you use, the ecological impacts. Nuclear power ranks number one in terms of green energy. And so it's kind of this great paradox that we're living in at the moment. We're all scratching our heads frantically, fumbling towards net zero. We need massive amounts of clean energy. And nuclear really doesn't play a huge part in that conversation. And that's what motivates me.
Does it motivate you, or does it make you want to repeatedly bang your head against people?
There's maybe a little bit of that, depending what side of the bed I woke up on. Okay. But I see this as an opportunity, actually. Nuclear, rather than being this kind of last resort, this thing that we have to say, oh, okay, if we must, as a society, it's something that we can embrace to improve the human condition on Earth.
So what's going to be, I don't know whether the right word is a tipping point, or what's going to be that, is there going to be a moment where like humans just suddenly appreciate, hold on, what we're talking about, this is crazy, or do you think something else has to happen?
So, as we transition towards net zero, you'll see fossil fuels being phased out, mostly in favour of renewable technologies, namely wind and solar. That can go on for a little bit, and we're living through the early days of that experiment now. But as renewables become more and more prevalent in the grid, we're going to have to start coming up against energy security and reliability. And we're kind of already in that phase in the UK at the moment. Right. So just last year, 2023, we had to turn on the coal-fired power stations a couple of times when we had still weather, in summer and in winter, okay, because in winter we need to heat our homes and in summer we need to cool them using air conditioning. We're starting to interface with this problem of energy security, and that's one of the problems that nuclear can solve. Yes. And so I think it will dawn on people slowly in the coming decade for sure. And it's already starting to dawn on politicians in some countries, but not everywhere. There's still quite a large anti-nuclear lobby.
And so what's kind of, if me at my level, like, I understand what nuclear is and I understand the benefits of it and kind of, but why should I be excited by nuclear?
Why should you be excited about it? Oh, that's a good question. Could you ask that question again?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so me, kind of, as a simple guy, kind of, I understand nuclear, I understand the power it can generate, everything like that. You're in the lab every day. What excites me about nuclear? What should excite me about? Why should I be looking to the future?
Oh, well, aside from the practical applications, which is an essentially indefinite amount of clean energy for the world that we can use to promote human flourishing, there's nuclear medicine as well. That's turning radioactive substances into novel new medicines, which are already being used, by the way, and deployed all over the world. Many people every year have cancers cured, illnesses diagnosed using nuclear medicines, and we're just beginning to tap the chemistry set, if you like, that's on offer to us to developing these new nuclear medicines. And aside from nuclear medicine, there's nuclear space exploration as well. You know, it's all well and good putting fires out here on Earth, solving problems, but you have to have something higher to aim for, and I think space exploration is a nice example of that. Nuclear power is absolutely fundamental to the exploration of the solar system and eventually settling on the surfaces of other worlds like the Moon and Mars.
Is the perception of nuclear and the mass adoption of it for society, is that going to be driven by politics and kind of and the politicians driving it forward, or is it going to be the general public who are going to be like, we need something different?
I think it will be public-led. Once public support changes for nuclear, the politicians should follow, at least in a democratic society. Yes. And so I think it's public-led.
And so it's a question of kind of getting the public awareness up and up and up.
For sure, absolutely. Not just the benefits of nuclear, but also some myth-busting as well along the way. For example, the fears about radioactivity are in such disproportion to the risks of radioactivity in the general public. Even from things like nuclear power, the exposure to radioactivity is absolutely minimal.
Yeah.
It's almost unmeasurable. There's certainly no discernible health effects, and so kind of busting those myths and presenting the evidence to people and then letting them make their own minds up, that should change public opinion.
So let me ask, and I haven't seen the film, which is my bad, but Oppenheimer, was that good or bad from your perspective?
I quite enjoyed Oppenheimer. I've read quite a few books about that period of history. It was amazing how quickly we went from discovering how to split atoms to being able to do it en masse. First of all in rudimentary nuclear reactors, and now in the giant power stations that can power entire cities, and of course atomic weaponry as well. It was a scientific revolution like no other, that's for sure. But I quite enjoyed Oppenheimer and Barbie.
Of course. Brilliant. Sorry for your time, and you've left us lots to think about.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Cheers.